The quiet panic. You guys have been asking me to share this story for months now. And honestly, I've been putting it off because every time I think about it, I get these chills that run down my spine. But after what happened last week, I realized I can't keep this to myself anymore. This is something that completely changed how I view friendship, death, and the connections we have with people even after they're gone. It was a typical rainy Thursday afternoon when I got the package. I wasn't expecting anything, and when I saw my name written in handwriting I didn't recognize, I almost threw it away thinking it was some kind of scam. But something made me hesitate. The return address was from a law office about 3 hours away from where I live, and the package felt heavier than it looked. I remember setting it on my kitchen counter and just staring at it for a good 10 minutes. There was this weird feeling in my gut, like when you know something's about to change, but you can't put your finger on what it is. When I finally tore open the brown paper wrapping, I found a small wooden box with intricate carvings on the lid, and attached to it was a letter with an official letterhead. The letter started with, "Dear recipient, we are writing to inform you that you have been named as a beneficiary in the estate of Marcus Thompson." My heart stopped. Marcus Thompson. I hadn't heard that name in over 4 years, not since we lost touch after college. But seeing his name written there in black and white brought back a flood of memories that I thought I had buried. Marcus and I met during our sophomore year when we got stuck as lab partners in organic chemistry. I was this anxious kid who overthought everything, and he was the complete opposite. Laid back, funny, always cracking jokes even when we were failing our experiments. We became inseparable after that. Study sessions turned into late-night conversations about everything and nothing. We'd spend hours talking about our dreams, our fears, what we wanted to do with our lives. The thing about Marcus was that he had this way of making everyone around him feel like they mattered. He remembered the smallest details about people. Your favorite coffee order, the name of your childhood pet, that embarrassing story you told him once when you were stressed about finals. He collected these little pieces of people and held on to them like they were treasures. After graduation, we promised we'd stay in touch. You know how it goes. You exchange numbers, make plans to visit, swear you'll never lose contact. But life happens. New jobs, new cities, new responsibilities. Our texts became less frequent, then occasional, then nothing at all. I always told myself I'd reach out to him eventually. Maybe when things settled down, maybe when I had something interesting to share, but I never did. And now, according to this letter, Marcus had died 6 months ago in a car accident. The lawyer's note explained that Marcus had left specific instructions about this package. He had apparently updated his will just 2 years prior, and I was one of only 3 people who received something. The letter mentioned that Marcus had been very particular about the timing. The packages were only to be sent out exactly 6 months after his death, not before. I sat there in my kitchen holding this wooden box and trying to process the fact that my old friend was gone. The guilt hit me like a truck. How had I not known? How had 6 months passed without me having any idea that someone who was once so important to me was no longer in this world? With shaking hands, I opened the wooden box. Inside, nestled in soft velvet, was a small brass compass that looked like it had seen some serious adventures. The metal was tarnished and worn, and there were tiny scratches all over the surface that told stories I'd never hear. But what really got to me was the engraving on the back. In Marcus's messy handwriting, it said, "For the journey ahead, MT." Underneath the compass was a folded piece of paper. I recognized Marcus's handwriting immediately. That same chicken scratch that used to drive our professors crazy when he'd turn in handwritten assignments. The note was dated just 3 months before his death. It started with, "Hey, if you're reading this, then I'm probably not around to explain this in person, which really sucks because I had this whole speech planned out." Even in death, Marcus was making jokes. The note continued, "I know we haven't talked in a while, and that's on both of us. But you were one of the best friends I ever had, and I wanted you to know that I never forgot about you or the conversations we used to have." He wrote about how he'd thought about reaching out so many times over the years, but always chickened out, worried that too much time had passed or that we'd grown too far apart. He mentioned specific memories that I had completely forgotten, like the time we got locked out of our dorm at 2 in the morning and had to sleep in the library study room, or when we drove 6 hours to see that band we both liked and ended up getting lost for half the trip. But then the note took a turn that I wasn't expecting. Marcus wrote, "This compass belonged to my grandfather. He gave it to me before he died, and he told me it would always point me toward what I needed most. I thought that was just old man nonsense for years, but lately I've been thinking he might have been onto something." He explained that he'd been carrying the compass with him everywhere for the past year, not because he needed help with directions, but because it reminded him of the importance of staying oriented toward the things that really matter: family, friendship, making a positive impact on the world around you. "I'm giving this to you," the note continued, "because I remember those late-night conversations we used to have about wanting to make a difference, about not wanting to waste our lives on meaningless stuff. You always talked about how you wanted to help people, how you wanted your life to count for something. I hope this compass helps remind you of that when you need it most." The letter went on for 2 more pages, sharing memories and inside jokes that made me laugh and cry at the same time. He told me about his job as a social worker, how he'd been helping kids in foster care find stable homes. He wrote about a trip he'd taken to Peru where he'd volunteered at an orphanage, and how that experience had changed his perspective on what it meant to live a meaningful life. Near the end, Marcus wrote something that I've read probably 100 times since then. "I know this is going to sound weird coming from someone who's dead, but I want you to promise me something. Don't wait to reach out to the people who matter to you. Don't assume there will be time later. I spent too many years thinking I'd reconnect with old friends eventually, and now eventually has run out." As I sat there in my kitchen holding this compass and reading Marcus's words, I realized that this wasn't just a gift from a deceased friend. This was a challenge, a mission, a wake-up call that I desperately needed. The weight of the compass in my palm felt heavier than it should have. like it was carrying the weight of all the conversations we never had and all the years we let slip away. But here's where the story gets really strange, and why I finally decided I had to share this with you guys. Because what happened next made me question everything I thought I knew about coincidence, fate, and the connections we have with people even after they're gone. I decided to test Marcus's theory about the compass pointing toward what you need most. I know it sounds ridiculous, but grief makes you do strange things. So I held it flat in my palm and watched the needle. It spun for a moment before settling on northwest. I grabbed my keys without even thinking about it and started driving in that direction. 20 minutes later, I found myself in a part of town I rarely visited, parked outside a small coffee shop called the Daily Grind. The compass needle was pointing directly at the entrance. I almost turned around and drove home because this felt absolutely insane. But something about Marcus's letter, about his challenge to not wait for later, made me get out of the car. Inside, the place was nearly empty except for a barista and an older woman sitting alone at a corner table. She was crying quietly while staring at what looked like old photographs spread out in front of her. The compass in my pocket seemed to grow warmer, which I know sounds completely crazy, but I swear that's what happened. I ordered a coffee I didn't really want and found myself walking over to her table. I'm normally not the type of person who approaches strangers, especially ones who are clearly having a private moment. But I thought about Marcus's words about helping people, about not wasting life on meaningless stuff. "Excuse me," I said, feeling awkward as hell. "I don't mean to intrude, but are you okay?" She looked up with red-rimmed eyes and gave me this sad smile. "Oh, sweetie, that's very kind of you to ask. I'm just having one of those days, you know." She gestured to the photographs. Today would have been my son's 35th birthday. He died 3 years ago in Afghanistan. My chest tightened. Here I was, mourning the loss of a friend I hadn't even stayed in touch with, and this woman had lost her child. "I'm so sorry for your loss," I said, and she invited me to sit down. Her name was Patricia, and for the next hour she told me about her son David, how he'd always wanted to be a soldier, how proud she was of his service, how empty the house felt without his laugh filling up the rooms. She showed me pictures of him as a kid, as a teenager, in his uniform. The resemblance between David and Marcus was striking, not physically but in their eyes. That same warmth, that same spark that made you feel like everything was going to be okay. As Patricia talked, I found myself sharing about Marcus, about the package, about the compass, about the guilt I felt for letting our friendship fade. She listened with the kind of attention that only someone who understands loss can give. "You know what's interesting?" Patricia said, picking up one of David's photos. "The last letter David sent me, he wrote about a conversation he'd had with another soldier about regrets. This young man had told David that his biggest fear wasn't dying in combat, it was dying with things left unsaid to people back home." She paused, wiping her eyes. "David made me promise him that if anything happened to him, I wouldn't let his death be meaningless. He wanted me to live fully, to connect with people, to not waste time on petty grudges or fear of being vulnerable." The parallel hit me like a slap. Here were two different people in two different circumstances, both trying to send the same message from beyond the grave. Don't wait. Don't waste time. Don't let fear keep you from the connections that matter. Patricia and I exchanged numbers before I left. She hugged me tight and thanked me for listening, but honestly, I think she helped me more than I helped her. As I walked back to my car, the compass felt lighter in my pocket, like it had accomplished whatever mysterious purpose it was supposed to serve. But that was just the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I started carrying the compass everywhere. Not because I believed it had magical powers or anything, but because it reminded me of Marcus's challenge. And the weirdest things kept happening. The compass led me to volunteer at a local food bank where I met Sarah, a single mom who was struggling to feed her kids after losing her job. I ended up helping her find work through a connection at my company. It pointed me toward an old bookstore where I ran into my high school English teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, who was battling cancer alone because she didn't want to burden her family. I started visiting her twice a week. Each time I followed the compass, I found someone who needed help. Someone who needed a friend. Someone who needed to know that they mattered. It was like Marcus was still orchestrating these moments of connection from wherever he was. But the most incredible thing happened just last week, which is what finally convinced me I had to share this story. I was having a particularly rough day at work when I felt that familiar warmth from the compass. It was pointing toward the parking garage. So I followed it down to the third level where I found a man sitting in his car with the engine running and a hose attached to his exhaust pipe. I'm not going to lie, I panicked. I had no idea what to do, but I knew I couldn't just walk away. I knocked on his window until he rolled it down, and I asked if he was okay. He looked at me with the most defeated expression I've ever seen and said, "Why do you care?" I thought about Marcus, about Patricia's son David, about all the conversations and connections that get cut short when we assume there will be more time. Because your life matters, I told him. Because someone somewhere is going to miss you more than you realize. We talked for 2 hours in that parking garage. His name was James, and he'd been battling depression for months after his divorce and losing custody of his kids. He felt like he had nothing left to live for, like no one would even notice if he was gone. I told him about Marcus, about the compass, about how my friend's death had taught me that we're all more connected than we realize. I shared Patricia's story and Sarah's story and how helping them had helped me process my own grief and guilt. By the end of our conversation, James had turned off his car and removed the hose. He's in therapy now, and we meet for coffee every week. He's slowly rebuilding his relationship with his kids, and last Tuesday he told me that our conversation in the parking garage saved his life. That night I sat in my apartment holding Marcus's compass and thinking about the chain reaction his death had started. How one person's final message had led to connection after connection, life touching life in ways that rippled outward like stones thrown into still water. So that brings me to why I finally decided to share this story with all of you. Marcus's compass taught me something that I think we all need to hear. We spend so much time waiting for the right moment to reach out, to help, to connect with the people around us. We tell ourselves we'll call that old friend tomorrow, we'll check on our neighbor next week, we'll volunteer when our schedule clears up. But here's the thing that Marcus understood, and what his grandfather probably knew when he passed down that compass. The right direction isn't always north or south or east or west. Sometimes the right direction is simply toward another human being who needs to know they're not alone in this world. I still carry the compass with me every day, not because I think it's magic, but because it reminds me that every single day we have opportunities to make someone's life a little bit better. Every day we can choose connection over isolation, courage over comfort, action over waiting for someday. Marcus never got to see how his final gift changed my life and the lives of everyone I've met because of it. But somehow, I think he knew it would. That's just the kind of person he was, even at the end, still looking out for his friends and trying to make the world a little bit brighter. If you take anything away from this story, let it be this. Don't wait to tell the people in your life that they matter to you. Don't assume there will be more time. And when you see someone who needs help, who needs a friend, who just needs someone to notice they exist, be that person for them. Because you never know when a simple conversation, a small act of kindness, or just showing up might change everything. The compass is sitting on my desk right now as I record this, and I swear it's pointing directly at the camera. Maybe that's its way of telling me that sharing this story was exactly what I needed to do. Thanks for listening, guys, and remember, we're all just trying to find our way home.